Good afternoon and welcome to today's lunch break with the Rabbi. Welcome to another week as we continue to explore different fascinating facts of Judaism and the weekly Torah reading. Today we'll begin, as we do usually on Mondays, to get a little bit of an overview of what's in the week ahead and a little insight into this week's Torah reading. As we've discussed, just a little reminder and mention, starting next Tuesday, November 10th, we are having our JLI course. It's going to be at 7:30 at night. You can join either in person or via Zoom. So that's at jewishli.com/JLI fall to register to our JLI course that will be starting November 10th. Now back to today's class. This week's Torah reading is the Torah reading of Vayera, which begins how God appears to Abraham as Abraham is sitting outside his tent, recuperating from last week's circumcision, waiting for guests to come. The Talmud explains that Avram was so desperate to have guests that he was sitting outside. However, God made it very hot that nobody should bother him and he should be able to recuperate. But he didn't take that as a sign, but he still was looking forward to having guests come and join him in his meal. Avram was a person that, regardless of what happened, as we read in this week's Torah reading, he hears about the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. He prays for them. He then is told by God at the end of the Torah reading, where we finish off with the episode that we read every single day in our prayer. We read it on the day of Rosh Hashanah, where God tells him to take his only son, his son who's supposed to be the future of the Jewish people. His son who God promises him, this will be your children like the sands by the sea and by the stars in the sky, saying that this son, take the son and bring him as a sacrifice. Abraham did not hesitate even for a moment. As the words in the Torah tell us, Vayashkem Avram ba'boker, Avram got up early morning and he followed every single direction that God has told him. His son was not a young child at the time. Yitzchak was 37 years old. And together they willfully went and did what God said. And that was the 10th and final challenge of God seeing the absolute devotion that Abraham had. Which over here the great question comes. How many times can you try a person and see that they really believe? Avram went through 10 different challenges. Not only that, every single one of the challenges that he went through was another one of an obstacle or exact opposite of what God promised him. For example, last week's Torah reading, God tells him, wherever you go, your name will be renowned. You'll have great wealth. You have children. And what's the first thing God tells him? Leave your parents' home. Start wandering around. One of the things about wandering around is that you spend a lot of money. Nobody gets to know you. And you can't have children because you're busy traveling. How is anything possible? Again, God tells him, like in this week's Torah reading, your son Yitzchak will be the future of the Jewish people, and tells him to bring him as a sacrifice. But does Avram's belief in God get shattered? Not for a moment. Not even for an iota. At the 10th and final challenge, he is still going, waking up early in the morning, following God's instructions to the letter, to the law, to the T. What is it with Avram? Elie Wiesel says a story about his time in the concentration camps. Elie Wiesel was a writer, as you know, and he was about 10 years old when World War II broke out. His family that lived in the city of Sighet was then taken and trained and carted to the Auschwitz labor camps. His mother and sister died right away. His father, which was a little bit stronger, was able to survive the camp, but 3 months before the liberation, he got a terrible stomach virus or whatever it was called, a very terrible disease at the time, and the Nazis just did away with him in front of Elie Wiesel's eyes. In his book, The Trial of God, Elie talks about the time that they went through in the labor camps. And he recalls about an episode that happened. That once he was called in by one of his teachers in the labor camps into a group of Jews that got together, and there were 3 rabbis sitting at the head table. And they said, we're taking God to court. We're bringing a testimony against God. And you, Elie, are the witness. For what you have witnessed in front of your eyes, your whole family decimated, destroyed, and killed and murdered in front of your eyes. You have the right to bring God to court. Elie Wiesel, a young child at the time, pours out his heart in front of the judges and says, yes, my complaint to God, which with the judges at the time make the verdict, God is guilty. There was no right for him to make such an atrocity, such a devastation. As soon as the court convened and finished, it was adjourned, the rabbis get up and they say, okay, now it's time to say the evening prayers. Elie Wiesel is standing there dumbfounded. How is it possible? These 3 rabbis who just found God guilty of the most heinous crimes, allowing such terrible devastation happening to his own people, are now getting up to glorify, to sanctify, and to praise God. Isn't that an oxymoron? Isn't that a contradiction? How is this possible? How does one tolerate such opposites? And Elie Wiesel understood that the strength of the Jewish people was exactly that. That we are able to tolerate the opposites. We are able at the same time believe in God, appreciate God's greatness, and at the same time question, where is God? Do you know that one of the interesting things, there are 613 commandments. There is no commandment to believe in God. Some authorities want to say that in one of the 10 commandments, I am God who has taken you out of Egypt, there's a commandment to believe in God. Because the question is, how can I command somebody to believe something? Either you believe in it or you don't. You never, even a person, if you command them to believe in, why should they believe that the commandment ever happened to believe in it? Doesn't make sense. It's not logical to command something to believe. It's once you believe in it, then there is what you believe in. But the step number 1 is you need to believe. How is it that the human being has the ability to believe? In fact, the word emunah in Hebrew doesn't just mean to believe, but also means to train. Belief is something we're trained, we're taught, we're learned. And how is this possible? Going back to the first believer, the one who ingrained in it within the soul is Abraham. Abraham had 2 stages in his life. Abraham had a stage in his life where he was self-developed. Whatever he believed in came because of his own self-cultivation. He lived a land of pagans. He lived in a place where people were completely idolatrous. And he himself came to the self-discovery of God's belief. He himself came to the understanding of what it means to God. And therefore, every decision that he made was calculated based on that notion that he believes there's a God. Even if it meant to give his life up in certain circumstances, was based on the fact that he has an agenda to prove that God exists. So even though he may put his life in jeopardy or in danger, but if this is going to advance his cause of belief in God, he went ahead and did it. But all of a sudden it came to a level where the belief in a God required something beyond pushing an agenda, which was bringing his son as a sacrifice. There was nobody there that was going to see it. He was going to destroy everything that he built up, Because everybody saw finally he had a child at 99 years old. His wife was 90 years old. They had a child. And over here, what's going to happen? This same child they're going to kill. By the same God who blessed him, that child. It runs contrary to anything if he wants to push an agenda. There was no agenda here. There was just an absolute core belief in God that was above and beyond comprehension. How did he have that? Where did it come from? And this we look and we see in the creation of the human being. When God created every single one of the creations of the universe, every single one of them says, let there be light, and it came to be grass, and it came to be animals. But when it came to the human being, it says that God inhaled and exhaled within the individual a soul. The first Chabad Rebbe explains that every single one of us has a piece of God within ourselves. And when we believe in God, we're not necessarily believing in God, but we're believing in ourselves that has God within it. And that's why it is so easy for us to believe in God, while at the same time, events in our life are seemingly opposite. Because all of us, every single one of us, inherently believes in God and in every single moment of our life. It is just that sometimes there are events that don't allow and block that godly spirit that we have within it. There are many times in life that unfortunately the conscious covers over the subconscious. But subconsciously, inside every single one of us, there's a part of God. So belief in God is intrinsic within the individual. It's not that you need to believe in something outside of yourself. You just need to train yourself to know what you have within inside yourself. And then you can believe, and then you can tolerate opposites. You can bring God to court, and at the same time, pray to God that you should be helped. It's not a contradiction. We have many events in our life that are unfold, many challenges that come our way that question our belief in God. We are what, when, and how. But we know that we are God. We are part of God. And therefore we can believe in God and know that He will do what is best for us and bring us out of any difficult circumstance, alleviate the challenge that we have, and as we discussed last week, show us the miracle in everything in life. Just like by Abraham, that God has seen that he stood up to the challenge and he blessed him for generations to come. So too, God is waiting for us to identify that with the godly spirit that we have within ourselves, stand up to the challenge, and we are continuously blessed. God bless you. Have a wonderful day. And we only merit to see the blessings that God continuously gives us. Looking forward to seeing you again tomorrow. I know it's election day, but hopefully we'll see you tomorrow at 1 p.m. God bless you and have a wonderful day.